Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. It's time for this week's Friday morning GM with my co-host Vas Laricos of Baltimore Beatdown. Vas, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well, doing very well. Big weekend of Baltimore sports right around the corner here. Excited for that and hoping the Ravens can pull off the AFC North road sweep.
Looking forward to it for sure. And after watching the wild card series in the AL and seeing how quickly it all ended for both the Jays and Rays, and no tears are being shed, and yet you also kind of worried that those were two pretty good teams that got ousted pretty quickly. The Orioles will have a 5-game series to try and prove themselves against a good Rangers team. So it's certainly be a challenging series for them at the very least. I do notice Fangraphs has them as the lowest probability now of the 4 AL teams to win the World Series.
I think Fangraphs has been against them from all season, haven't they? It just shows that the winning the division, getting that 5-game series instead of the 3-game, how crucial that is.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's move on to the Ravens here. We certainly want to talk primarily, I think, about a fluid injury situation. A lot of possible Week 5 returns.
Yes, indeed. So I guess the most notable one is Keaton Mitchell being activated or designated to return. So I believe he has a 3-week window, 21 days. The question is, what are the Ravens going to do at running back in the meantime? They currently have only 2 running backs on the active roster, one of them being Justice Hill, who is dealing with a hamstring as well as a turf toe injury now. And Melvin Gordon is out of activations. Kenyon Drake has 2 remaining, and Keaton Mitchell could be activated at any time. So I think that's probably the first place to start.
So your guess here, because it's pretty clear to me what might happen. I think Mitchell gets activated this week based on him being, I think, a full participant, right? Not a limited.
He was full, correct? Yes, he was.
That's a pretty strong indication he'll be back sooner rather than later. The Ravens also have a problem that they've been kind of wasting a elevation on a running back, which has been decreasing their flexibility. Other positions actually caused them to have 9 offensive linemen this last week. I'll get into that maybe a little bit later, but it makes more sense for me that Mitchell would be a guy who could carry the rock quite a few times. Edwards played very well this week. I really hope that Hill is able to go, but if he isn't, then Drake is the logical elevation. I don't think they want to elevate or sign Gordon to the 53.
Right. In order to sign Gordon, they'd have to release somebody that's currently, it'd most likely be Josh Johnson, the quarterback. We've mentioned that a few times previously. Melvin Gordon has developed a reputation in the Ravens fan base as a good pass blocker. And I think you and I have discussed that a few times, and the stats don't back that up. And that just seems like one of those tropes that, he's a veteran. He must naturally be a good pass blocker. And it's not really true. And you have Gus Edwards, who's a very good pass blocker. We saw him lay a real nice block on Myles Garrett this last week. And you have Patrick Ricard if desperate times really need you to put a good pass blocker back there. So I don't see any use for Gordon going forward. He did have a couple decent runs last week, but Mitchell gives you more present value and certainly more future value.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mitchell is the big 2024 player. In that running back room, obviously, he's absolutely critical that the Ravens do that. Hill will be around too, and he might be of real value next year. But he's got a spotty injury history, so it's not someone you want to absolutely rely on. Mitchell, a speed merchant who the Ravens hopefully could really make use of, not just in the run game but in the pass game as well.
Absolutely. So moving on to 2 other full participants, Rashad Bateman. Really would have been nice if he would have been able to stay healthy during this last 2-game stretch when Beckham was out, but at least he returned to full practice with a hamstring. And Marcus Williams with the pectoral issue. We thought there was a chance he could suit up last week. Did not, but you start stacking 4 and 5 full practices together, you think he's going to be activated soon.
I would think so. Or if he's really not ready to go, they got to be thinking about what is the potential for an IR at this point. So if there truly is something they're not liking, maybe his bench numbers, his strength numbers or something are down. Maybe he's not moving properly. I don't think that would be the case with a pec injury, but maybe he's not hitting in the way he normally would. Then you got to start thinking about an IR move, and because that roster spot is at a premium right now. I actually think if Williams returns, I do think it will be this week. that he plays on the back end. And I think now Geno Stone, we just talked about a potential contract extension for him last week. Geno Stone has played now too well to be removed. And I think it fits the Ravens' needs more, although Mollett played great. It's great to have this problem, by the way, to have Hamilton move back to slot, really impact the game up front the way he did for 1 week and a few snaps of a second before Worley got hurt. I think that's the alignment that makes sense for the Ravens.
I completely agree with that. I think it gives you the best of all worlds and the impact of Hamilton. And I think that should be the alignment not only the remainder of this season, but hypothetically the next few years going down the road. Hamilton is just such a chess piece when he has that ability to play close to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. Okay. So now the next several years, we haven't got Stone back yet. And he's unfortunately, Stone is playing himself right out of Baltimore right now with this great season so far. We'll see how that works out. Maybe they figure it out during the year, but they could still develop another safety. They've got guys, they got another guy on the practice squad in Lucien. They've got other players that it could be in their future plans as well.
Yes. And safety, we've seen a position where they can, they're very good at developing safeties, no question about it. Next player, Ronnie Stanley, I believe 2 full practices last week and then a limited on Friday. So he did not get a jersey on Sunday. And with Morgan Moses now did not practice on Wednesday. We haven't seen Thursday yet. We're recording it right as they hit the field. They need him to play this week, Ronnie Stanley. Yeah. And, it might just be one of those tough conversations that Eric DeCosta has to sit down and say, Ronnie, we know you're not 100%. We know you're 85% or 90%, but we paid you. I looked this up, $84 million they paid Ronnie Stanley so far. So, yeah.
This incredibly, there's a great reference that is an analogy to this I just love. But in the book Ball 4 by Jim Bouton, great book, by the way, if you haven't read it, take a read. It's tape-recorded musings of the 1969 Seattle Pilots. So it's very obscure stuff, but it's very well done. It's extremely well written. Anyway, Bouton talks about his experiences in years earlier with Mickey Mantle. And he came up, I think, at 62, and he was a star in like 63 and 64 for those Yankee teams that went to the World Series and lost. But the point about him was that he had spent a lot of time with Mickey Mantle, and he really went into a lot of the negative stuff about Mickey Mantle. Some of the stuff they would, go around with mirrors looking under hotel rooms and trying to spot women who were undressing and whatnot. It's just some really weird stuff when you get right down to it. That's one of the things that makes the book kind of cool. But he said that basically Ralph Houck, who was managing the Yankees at the time, would be sidling up. I think it was Houck sidling up to Mickey Mantle on the outfield, on the bench, in the dugout. If he's just playing a little catch on the side every day and say, "Hey, Mick, how's your knee feeling today?" Mm-hmm. And Mantle would start to tell him about how injured he was. And he'd say, we really need you out there today. And it's kind of the way I feel about the Ronnie Stanley situation is, it might not be in his best interest. And yet the Ravens need him so badly right now. They need him even to play at 60% of the Ronnie Stanley level, which basically I think, he played at kind of a replacement level for his snaps that he was in there for week 1. But if he could play that or maybe a little bit above, with his current condition, boy, do the Ravens need somebody who can block a little bit at one tackle position.
Right, absolutely. Second week in a row against a dynamic duo of edge rushers, and Pittsburgh's giving the Ravens trouble, giving Lamar trouble more than any other team, really. So yeah, you need Ronnie out there. Other than that, I guess outside backer and offensive tackle, the injury report's starting to look a little bit brighter. You also have Marlon Humphrey returning to the field for the first time this season, as well as Odell Beckham for the first time in a couple weeks, both limited. Justice Hill and Jalen Armour-Davis also limited this week.
Yeah, so to me, Bateman is the big one to get back. That will really open things up in the passing game a lot. They don't really have a true X right now that they can use. If Beckham can go back, it's just a bonus in terms of providing an extra target out there. Lamar did an incredible job moving around the pocket, but I will say this: the Ravens' offense is not at a stable level. It cannot continue. The red zone success is completely unsustainable. It would be a historic level, so far beyond historical. So it's basically like a 450 hitter in April and expecting to hit 450 for the whole season.
Right.
6.1 points per red zone drive. So that ain't happening. But what that means is the Ravens' relatively middling points per drive has to stay at the same level by improvements in efficiency in other areas. And that's going to take a lot of personnel improvement because tremendous weakness in the offensive line across the board. It wasn't just the tackle positions. They were the worst, but it was really weak across the board in the game against the Browns. They didn't really run the ball as effectively as they had. They did, Hill had some good runs. He had some good touches. Gordon, good runs, good touches, but they weren't tremendously effective doing anything offensively in this last game. And they need to get their series success rate, which is the most critical factor other than that red zone, maybe get that back up into the 75% range. It was 68% over the last 2 weeks combined.
Yes, completely agree. Unsustainable, as you said. So I think, you really need to have Ronnie Stanley back. If you don't have Ronnie, you're looking at McCary on the left, Falalele on the right. Falalele struggled last week against Watt and Highsmith. That's a recipe for trouble, especially when you don't necessarily have the difference makers at receiver that you had to start the season who can help alleviate some of that pressure. So, yeah, they need Ronnie back. The other player I'd like to mention from the injury report, not even on the injury report quite yet, is Tyus Bowser. He was eligible to return. He has apparently been doing work off to the side, and in an interview said he's not ready. And there are some whispers that there's a little frustration inside the castle with the injury timeline recovery. And just since this is the GM show, I would make mention $5.5 million available in cap savings if he is released after this season, Tyus, which maybe is enough to go towards keeping Michael Pierce or somebody like that.
Well, that's an interesting point. And if they could get a Kyle Van Noy back for another year, that might make sense. I'd hate to see Tyus Bowser go because he's the best at what he does in the NFL. But the NFI designation, that's why it exists. They've got him on this. He got injured away from the facility. We don't know how. With Suggs, it was a pickup basketball game. They did not NFI him with other players. Where it's happened before they were drafted, they have not necessarily NFI'd him, as was the case with Ajabo. But they activated him. He got paid for his first year. I think in Bowser's case, if there are frustrations, allow the NFI designation to affect his salary for as long as it needs to. And that's a cap savings this year, not just next. So,
right.
You got a bonus potentially from that. But
so other than that, you had Odafe away, did not practice. Morgan Moses did not practice. Daryl Worley did not practice. But you are getting healthier. I mean, if you look at the offensive side of the ball, you've had Lamar, both offensive guards, and Zay Flowers are the only starters that haven't missed a game this year. So 4 out of 11. So, yeah.
It would be really nice to have Worley back for this next game because it allows to stay in the Hamilton nickel for longer if there's some sort of injury on the back end. And Stone and Williams have both missed plays. So,
right. And I was actually surprised, maybe not surprised, but having Worley as a starter in this last week, and unfortunately he got injured, but there wasn't an indication that Hamilton was going to be moving to a full-time nickel job. But they did it anyway. And I think if Worley did not get injured, he would have played the full game.
Oh yeah, and he did the previous week. That's exactly what happened. So,
right,
yeah, and he showed up and played well in that game in a sixth, roughly, that he played because it was about 10 snaps, I think, in this last week, and looked really good. Yeah,
pass breakup and a couple good tackles. So I guess the question for me is Humphrey and Beckham, are they going to rush them back this week? Or are those players that you can look and say, we're going to save them for London?
Are you? Well, let's ask the question this way. If you bring back Humphrey, how do you integrate him into the lineup? Now, this is a GM show, but this is an organizational decision in part. Is do you talk to Harbaugh about rotating him back in so he gets a ramp?
Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and the brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First 2 legs of your parlay hit? Cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at a bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boost, same-game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.
Up count of snaps and maybe starts around 20 or 30 in rotational play, perhaps with Stevens, while you continue what's been a very fine rotation on the other side at two cornerback spots. That much rotation seems odd, but the Ravens have done 3 for 2 in the past. I don't recall them ever doing 4 for 2.
I don't recall 4 for 2. Was there a season with Tavon, Brandon Carr, Jimmy Smith, and Marlon? And I think but then Tavon was mostly in the slot. I personally prefer that style of the 2018-2019 rate, even if everyone's fully healthy. I think that it can be a rotational position, just like receiver can be a rotational position where, you want to bring in some fresh legs for a 9 route, and you have somebody with fresh legs countering that. So yes, I would definitely ramp up Marlon slowly. And because the other corners are playing so well, if Brandon Stevens and Rock and Darby were getting toasted every game, that'd be a different story. But they're all playing well, and Pittsburgh definitely doesn't have a passing offense necessarily scares you. Nor does Tennessee the next game. So I think it would be prudent. You want Marlon Humphrey playing his best down the stretch and in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one to make sure I wasn't muted there for a second. But yeah, I'm with you on that entirely. I go with the rotation. The season you mentioned, 2018, Marlon Humphrey won the team MVP award. Playing irregularly in that manner with a fair amount of rotation. He gradually worked his way up till he was basically a full-time player at the end of the year. But it's a formula that has succeeded before, and I like your angle on it. They don't usually, or at least never that I've seen, have they replaced during a drive, and they haven't. For instance, with Yasin and Darby on the one side, they haven't done any in-drive replacements. It's like one plays a couple drives, and Yasin plays a couple, and then Darby a couple, and then Yasin a couple, and then Darby usually finishes. So it's about a 3-2 relationship in snaps, maybe. But it's if it's all the same on one drive, you're not gaining the fresh legs benefit on a play-by-play basis, but you're showing them something a little bit different, and you're allowing some people to regain if they have some wind issues or whatnot, they can take a series or 2 off.
I think it's worth giving Eric DeCosta some praise when you entered training camp with a pretty sketchy situation at cornerback. And then your top 2, really all 3 starters got hurt during training camp. And now you're in a position where you're entering week 5 and you almost have too many corners. And that's including some players getting hurt during the season. So definitely kudos to finding some Darby in particular, and also developing Brandon Stevens to the coaching staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give some numbers that support that thing. These are just the Ravens' outside corners. I'll add Millette to this group. The opposing quarterback passer rating and yards per target. Rock Ya-Sin, opposing quarterback rating 59. Yards per target 3.7. Brandon Stevens, opposing passer rating of 79. Yards per target are 6.84. Arthur Millette, opposing passer rating 74.3, yards per target 4.0. Kayvon Seymour, opposing passer rating 56.3. He was only targeted twice for 1 yard, so yards per target 0.5. Ronald Darby, 75.9 against him, and yards per target. Darby's having a fantastic year, by the way. 4.9. He's been targeted 25 times, so they've picked on him maybe a little bit, second most after Stevens. Only given up 123 yards this year.
Right.
Fantastic.
Outstanding. Really, not to get into scheme, but I think Mike McDonald has done a masterful job through the first 4 games of this season. No question about it. So I think we're pretty much through the injuries. If we want to move on to some practice squad adjustments and additions, Ravens lost Duron Harmon. Essentially, they opted for Daryl Worley over Duron Harmon the last few games, and I guess Harmon believed he had a better opportunity elsewhere, especially with Williams coming back. Brought back DeAndre Houston Carson, who was a safety, played a little bit in the preseason. Also picked up Trey Swilling, a corner, actually the corner that got into the fist fight with George Pickens when they were in college, which may be one of the character concerns why he wasn't on some players' boards. And probably the biggest one is Eric Tomlinson, former Raven, filled in admirably for an injured Nick Boyle in 2020 and parts of 2021. And I think he's brought back mostly for his ability to help chip block, pass protection, help out the injured offensive tackles.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I want to return to Tomlinson in just 1 second because Swilling and Carson, to me, are pure emergency contingency type players. I don't see Houston Carson seeing the field at all. If things go normally, I don't think he's a long-term guy at all because he's a 7th, 8 year player. He's been in the league a number of years. Swilling is a lottery ticket at corner who honestly has never been particularly good. I don't think he's played a single pro snap on defense, and this is he's been in 3 camps over 2 years. Is how I recall it. He's a 22 draftee. Does that sound right? Or non-draftee? Sorry, I should say.
I think so. Yes.
So anyway, that's we're not talking about anybody who's likely to play. In the case of Tomlinson, I think it's very different. I think that he's a guy who the Ravens know what he can do. You are not bringing in a receiving threat at all. They've thrown to him. He's effectively less than a Ricard receiving threat. They've thrown to him twice in 23 games with 1 reception as a Raven. And he is known as an outstanding inline blocker. I think they want to take some of that responsibility away from Andrews and make sure Andrews can line up split. And Tomlinson is a guy I expect to be activated pretty much right away. And so that means you're adding a player like Charlie Kolar to a group, probably Kolar himself. Yep. Obviously, you're not satisfied with his blocking. That's well indicated by this move. Right. Okay.
Right.
And that they would like to, get Tomlinson in there because if you otherwise were okay with it, Kolar is a much more dangerous receiving threat. You would put him at the end of the line. He'd take over some blocking responsibilities. He could help you chip Miles Garrett, TJ Watt, Highsmith, whoever it might be. And we just really haven't seen that from him. And also he's had some difficulties as a receiver.
Right. So this game going forward, probably the next 2 games actually, going up against automated fronts, I expect that Tomlinson may be activated and Kolar may be deactivated for the game, as long as the numbers work out. I know last week they activated every single person that was healthy, really the last 2 games. But hopefully some of these players are getting healthy, and instead of choosing between some of these extra, 9th offensive linemen, et cetera, you're putting a player that's in line to contribute.
Yeah, and that is really a key thing because the Ravens may need to make some moves in terms of IR if they can't do that. And if whatever move for IR will probably come Friday or Saturday to move somebody to elevate and sign somebody to make the switcheroos as close as possible to game time so that the Steelers don't have any practice after it. Not that they're not going to be game planning around who Eric Tomlinson is, even if they knew he was coming. In fact, the Steelers – and one of the things that the Know Your Foe guy said is the Steelers practice on what the Steelers think they can do well. They don't care about their opponents, which is kind of like playing only your own cards at poker.
Yeah.
It's a weakness. It's not a strength, by the way.
Completely agree. A little too hubristic, maybe a little, too focused on their own. But there's a lot of constant juggling, constant churning the practice squad, churning who's being activated, churning who's on injured reserve. Any player that comes back, they have to free up a spot. So if Tyus Bowser can come back in 2 weeks, or if David Ojabo can come back in 5 weeks, or Malik Ham, then Jeremiah Moon may be released. Same goes for the defensive side of the ball. If Pepe or Darius Washington or any of those players are to be activated, someone else has to be removed from the roster. So it's been a very injury-prone start to the season, and I think DeCosta has done a great job of churning and giving Harbaugh at least a bare minimum of what he needs to be able to eke out some wins.
Yeah, And maybe the other thing, I mean, obviously had a great year so far, I think, from DaCosta in a lot of ways. But one of the things that you could really point to is the money spent on coaching has really paid off. And they've got two coordinators that, as of right now, we could not be more thrilled with. Monken has done new things to improve the red zone offense that I think I'm not saying he's the only factor involved in that, but I think some of the scheme and spread has been better than it was under Roman, even though Roman had great red zone results in 2018. I think what's been done recently is fresh to the league, and it's been very effective with Lamar. A lot of the pinpoint throws aren't going to continue, but he has a good chance to use his legs effectively in the red zone and continue to give other teams fits. But I'm just really happy that they invested in positional coaching this offseason, including bringing in Lewis for the wide receivers and bringing in Chuck Smith for the pass rushers.
Yep, and Denard Wilson for the defensive backs. I think they've done a great job with definitely putting this coaching staff together. It doesn't affect your salary cap. So if you can have a Brandon Stevens playing it 3 times, 5 times what he's making level, and you don't have to pay for it against your cap, that helps you out for sure. So last point I wanted to make before we wrap up, or I believe this is our 5th or 6th episode of this series. Kyle Van Noy, official terms came out, $1.6 million, 1.4, I believe, counts against the cap, but maybe some of that deferral veteran benefit. So just looking at it here, after the draft, the Ravens had holes at outside linebacker and cornerback, 2 premium positions. I was very concerned. A lot of people were concerned. One of the things that that gives them a little bit more margin for error as far as the opportunity cost of investing in the wrong players is the willingness to borrow a little bit from the future with void years. But the other thing is just how DaCosta was able to attract competent starting caliber players for a low cost. So you have Kyle Van Noy for 1.4, Jadeveon Clowney for 2.5, Ronald Darby for 1.7, and Rock Yassin for $4 million. That's 4 premium positions, starting caliber players for less than $10 million. If you are able to do that every season, and I don't think you are, but if you are, then you can atone and compensate for paying Roquan Smith and potentially drafting Trenton Simpson and other players like that.
Atone is an interesting choice of words there, because it definitely slants that conversation in a certain way, but I understand what you mean by that. It is wonderful. And if you look back at Ravens history, it was Ozzie Newsome had an unbelievable run of top free agent signings between about 1997. Started with McCrary, and it was Woodson, Adams, it was Sharp. Yeah, it was those guys until the horrible mess of 2001 when he got 2 absolute duds, Leon Searcy and Elvis Gerbach. Yep. So you can it can go wrong in a hurry. Those guys, they get forgotten pretty quickly, and there are incentives to be paid on those contracts, I believe. So someone like Clowney's going to end up making more money than what we're seeing now, just the way Houston did. But anyway, I don't think anyone would argue.
Are his incentives tied to pressures or to sacks?
Oh, that's a good point. I don't know. But in any case, I don't think anyone would argue with the price on Clowney, even if incentives were significant.
Oh, no question. He's was my defensive MVP for the article we put out on the Baltimore Beatdown.
Through 4 games? Okay.
Through 4 games, yep.
The 4/17 poll, as we now need to call it, right?
Right.
All right. Outstanding. Always a pleasure doing the show with you, Vas. Where can people talk to football with you online?
I am at Baltimore Beatdown as the co-managing editor and author, and on Twitter/X, I am at Vasilis Beatdown, Vasilis, and also have a podcast called The Ravens Way at Ravens Way Pod.
Outstanding. Okay, other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. Very open as to topic type. One thing we're going to try to moderate a debate coming up between 2 friends who have very different ideas about something. I thought how much fun that would be, and I'd be happy someday to go on with Vas to debate, organizational strategies with him on somebody else's pod. I thought that'd be fun. So if you and a friend have very different views on something, I'd love to kind of ask some questions of both of you, and we'll do it that way. But I'm looking forward.
Are you the judge?
I will. So I'm not. Nobody's going to be the judge. I'll be the moderator. Okay. I'll ask some questions, but the whoever listens to the thing can be the judge and decide who's the Who's
There you go.
Okay. But anyway, Voss, always a pleasure to do this show with you. For Ken McCusick, for Voss Larikos, this is Ken McCusick saying goodbye, and we'll talk to you next week on Friday Morning GM.